that was a voice which we all take in our countries and vote, and a government comes out for that on behalf of all of the people, right? We will assume, and we can.
But hold on, I've got to stop you there. A lot of these countries that coffee is grown in do not have actual legitimate democracies where their voice is being represented.
I take issue with that, with a lot of these countries where we produce coffee. We can say that many countries that consume coffee all over the world, right, around that issue that may represent or may not represent other people. So I don't think that is something of producing countries exclusively.
Oh, no, but I agree with you that same thing is happening in America right now. This year, in a month from now, the same thing is going to happen. But we're having a conversation about coffee producers. Friends, we have an announcement. On October 28, 29 and 30, Maple Forward is proud to present the first of its kind live online event titled Introduction to Regenerative Coffee Farming. This workshop will happen live in 3 different events in English, Spanish and Portuguese to help coffee producers and the rest of us in the coffee industry understand regenerative ag and how to implement it so that coffee farmers stand a chance at surviving these brutal weather conditions long into the future. It will also help us understand how we can talk about regenerative ag to our customers. This live online presentation will be led by highly specialized and experienced agronomists, coffee producers, and agricultural engineers who have worked transforming coffee farms from conventional farms to regenerative farms and agroforestry around the world. Tickets are $10 for coffee producers and $150 for everybody else. When you pay $150 though, you're securing your ticket and the ticket of 14 other coffee producers that didn't quite have the funds to pay for their own tickets. Not only does your ticket buy you access to the workshop, but it also gives you access to newly formed WhatsApp groups, one in English, one in Spanish, one in Portuguese, where people can continue to exchange information and ideas about regenerative ag before and after the workshops. For more details, head to mapleforward.coffee/workshops. Check the link in the show notes for details and help us spread the word about this workshop by sharing our posts on social media. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 4 of a fantastic 5-part series with Miguel Zamora from the ICO. Miguel, we're talking about a living income for coffee producers, and I think this is going to be one of the juiciest parts of this discussion. Off air, you and I were talking about how conversations in the coffee industry can often be very generalized. And in the last episode, we're talking about how there are people out there that are probably going to be yelling at their phones, listening to our conversation. But we were talking about the idea that there are decisions that are being made on behalf of coffee producers that coffee producers perhaps aren't involved in and most likely are not involved in. And these decisions are being made by governments and corporates and consulting companies, etc., etc. And off air, you and I started talking about this kind of tendency for people who are coffee roasters and baristas and people who are don't really have insight into these processes to generalize about this. What has been your experience around that? Because I'd like to talk about that generalization, because I know that there are a lot of people that are yelling at their phone saying, Lee, why aren't you asking all the right questions? Go ahead.
Why you aren't? Why you were?
Well, I'm telling you now, there are people that are out there that are saying, Lee, why are you letting Miguel off so easy? Why aren't you asking him? Why are corporations involved in this? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. No. Yeah, I think that, it happens, some of that in coffee. It tends to happen more one-sided when it's about, farmers. And I think that we have always been that, right? Like, we know the stories of the visit to a farm and random people giving advice to the farmer about what they should do at the farm, right? Like those nightmare stories. You will never do that to a barista. Hey, why don't you give it a little more time, that infusion, right?
Oh, they do.
There are things, I think that happen in coffee. I think that we do. I was telling you, I've been in coffee for 20 years. I started working on Fair Trade USA. So, I'm familiar with that, and people were like, fair trade doesn't work. Fair trade works, should solve all of the issues, or it should be this and should be that. And the issues always are more complex than what, they may appear, right? Like, why don't just companies pay a higher price and the living income is, or secure? prices that you were saying, they're really high right now. Are farmers closing the living income? Who can say that, right? And or how do you know if you don't have the information to make that claim as a company? The coffee that you purchase. I mean, company says I pay a really great price for my coffee. It's all of direct trade. I made the farmer took a selfie at the farm, right? How do you know? What do you know about what's actually the covering the farmer covering the cost of production is profitable and beyond profitable? With the profit is able to have a decent standard of living that we would like for all of our families. I think that really something that I like about the approach that we try to take is that we try to get the data, the information to see if those decisions, if the work is actually there. As imperfect as a study might be, it gives you an idea if it is really well done of where things are. What is that potential benchmark and how far you are to make those decisions. When many projects happen all over the world on productivity for coffee, if we capture information from those projects, well, we can have an idea how changing variety and using the right resources and the right practices for that variety with the right cost, what could be the increase in income, right? It's going to be perfect. It's going to be applicable to everybody, no, but it gives ideas it gives information to try to make better decisions. What is the voice of the farmers, with that government? Well, hopefully, right, in that country, the farmers voted for that, right? Elected, the people in that country elected that government. That was the voice, which we all take in our countries and vote, and a government comes out for that on behalf of all of the people, right? We will assume, and we can.
But hold on, I got to stop you there. A lot of these countries that coffee is grown in do not have actual legitimate democracies where their voice is being represented.
You see, I take issue with that, with a lot of these countries where we produce coffee. We can say that many countries that consume coffee all over the world, right, around that issue that may represent or may not represent other people. So I don't think that is something of producing countries exclusively.
Oh, no, but I agree with you. That same thing is happening in America right now. This year, in a month from now, the same thing is going to happen. But we're having a conversation about coffee producers. That's the only reason that I use that. No disrespect to anybody, but we are talking about coffee producers here.
And, and again, my point beyond is the opportunity of the things working properly and what that can bring, right? There will be issues in some places. There are issues always, as we know, as we discuss, consuming and producing countries.
Right.
But there is a key potential if the government is supporting farmers in being able to help with the roads so they can take out the coffee, with the local legislation that allows, with the technical assistant providers, with extension is to support that, right? That is the opportunity. I think for me, it's like if we can mobilize that completely or at a good stage to support coffee, that is for the farmer is going to be a lot more than a 10%, 20%, 30% increase in price. Because the support that farmer is going to be able to have from research around better varieties, from the support from a system that works better and that allows for a market transparency that the farmer actually receives a higher price. All of that, in addition that it's more long-term potentially solution, it's going to have an effect that I think is way greater than what an increase in price could be, a realistic increase. So my point with the price is, yes, it is part of it. It has to be part of the conversation, has to be part of the solution. But just by increasing a price, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to meet a living income. And it creates even, if we bring the conversation even farther to the more challenging part, there are farmers which with triple the price of coffee, they won't be profitable in the farm, right? Because of the size of the farm, because many issues, right? So, but how do you know? Where do you know that is? What additional support you provide that? Who will provide that support? The government, likely. So really being able to understand that, to go beyond the going back to the generalization of price, just pay a higher price and it's fixed. Since being able to understand that country by country, region by region, with the actual information, average size of farm, and what additional products are you growing. Really getting that, it helps with better decisions that then governments, companies, we all can make to support, again, that the farmers can have, can prosper from coffee, not only achieve a living income, but living income as a step for prosperity from coffee production.
Having this conversation with you, I've come to realize that I'm far more jaded than I thought I was. I really admire your trust in the ecosystem around you. This regenerative agriculture project that we're working on, we couldn't bring in any sponsors because we couldn't, with any level of confidence, know that if we brought in sponsors, that there was 100% certainty that we would still be proud to be associated with those sponsors in 10 years from now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I have heard, at this point, after 8 years of doing this podcast, thousands of stories with producers of the fact that they can't trust the co-ops that they work with. They can't trust the governments that they work with. They can't trust a lot of the logistics companies that they work with. They can't trust the trading companies that they work with. Even when the price goes up on the sea market, the traders all get together and suppress the price of coffee and say that they just will not pay the price that has gone up. And so we had to run this regenerative project and reduce the price of it to make sure, because governments are trying to suppress the information for regenerative agriculture, that allow farmers to not only earn a better income, but to save money. So I did not know before this conversation how jaded I was. So I'm grateful for that. And I think that how jaded I am is legitimate, because I get to see a side of this industry that a lot of people, let me say that better. I get to talk about openly a side of this industry that a lot of people cannot talk about publicly. I don't know how we fix this though, because it's important that the ICO does what the ICO does. Right? And anyone who's listening to this that's like, well, we should just throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we've got these people in government making these decisions based on what producers should be doing, that's completely unreasonable. Maybe it is unreasonable. But what's the alternative? If the ICO doesn't do what the ICO does, and the ICO is not engaging with governments, what happens then?
I think that it would be a big missed opportunity, huge missed opportunity, if we don't engage with governments in consuming and producing countries to help to grow the sector in a way that everybody wins, right? And I think that is the opportunity, right? I think that not...
Is it achievable though?
I think that we can achieve a lot. I mean, I think that there are different ways that we can approach this, yes, beyond coffee. Right? We talk about the climate crisis and what happens for the future of my kid and our kids. We can say, are we really doing anything? Or we can keep on going, right? We can keep on going, right. Try to make a change and build from one and go to the next one and keep on and learn and try to make the decision for next. I think that's, because the alternative is just not to do anything, to get paralyzed for the...
Right, exactly.
What we know can happen too, or try to build and partner with people who want to build. And then again, sometimes they will want to build with you for other reasons, but can you find that place in which you can partner with them to get that next step that helps you, and then you can measure back progress with whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. In this case, helping farmers, right, to prosper from coffee. So I think that it's a lot of that. And if we are only going to work with people that we feel, to your point, I think it's impossible to know if 10 years from now you're going to be still proud of. But if there are too many uncertainties,
Yeah.
I think that, but you can check that if today you're proud to partner with that person, right? Or with that organization and make a decision based on what you can do today. And then later, you couldn't know. How could you know what's going to happen?
Right.
The company changes owners, the board decides to do something else, right? But now, today, you can do that and you can partner with that. And then you explain to people, look, at this moment, this is a decision, the best that I could make based on this. And I think that for us in the task force, is a lot of that. We can partner with, if a company, the companies who are part of the task force are the largest companies in the world, some of the largest companies in the world, right?
But that's my problem with it, right? Like,
and I can see how some people just have like that approach of big is bad. But also, if those companies, the largest companies in the world, can implement practices that are evidence-based, that are sound to help with that, and then they implement it because of the accountability part,
that's the
there's
problem.
have to be accountability over time, then you made a lot of progress towards your goal. So I think that there has to be accountability always, but I do believe that you have to engage with people who will engage, as long as you can measure progress and say, okay, we took this next step, we took this next step. Because the alternative, I don't know. I mean, I think that the public-private approach is unique. It hasn't been exploited in the good word, in the good sense of the word, in coffee enough. It has a lot of potential, just like any approach or like any tool. I used to talk about certifications about a tool. Certification is a tool, like a hammer. You can build a house with a hammer, but not only with a hammer. You need other tools, right? So I think that you can use that as a tool that can work in different ways, but it is there as an approach that can potentially have significant impact in the lives of people. And then, and I feel that, I mean, for me, it's funny because I never saw myself as an international civil servant, which is what I am now, right? Working for intergovernment. That was never my dream. But I see the potential too that we have now with the countries that are members that really want to have an impact in the lives of people. And the process that has accountability in those governments, that if they don't do it, they don't get reelected, or people go to somewhere else. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than other processes that are more one-way street? This is what I want to do, and this is what we will do. Picture in the farm and at the school that I just built. Then again, there's nothing bad in building a school, right? But there is potential in other approaches that can go beyond that too. We all work together with key partners such as the government and companies and civil society, and measure progress in a way that is sound, that is robust, and keep people accountable at the end. If did we actually make the progress? Why not? Can we learn from this lesson, from this mistake? Or there is something beyond that we need to, that is flaw in the process that we need to redo? But I think that at least going through that, it's something that, to me, it is worth to explore, and I am excited about exploring that, and I hope that people can see that potential too and join similar efforts.
And I think what gives me a little bit of hope when I talk to somebody like you is knowing that you've been an agronomist for 20 years. Like, you're not just coming at this from a public policy perspective. You're not coming at this from the perspective of somebody who gets just bureaucracy. You have been on the ground. You have worked with coffee producers for a very long time. I want to make something clear. I don't think big is bad. I don't have that perspective. I know a lot of people have that perspective. I don't have that perspective. At the moment, big is disappointing. Why? Because they talk a lot of talk, and a lot of the opportunities that exist for them to do the kind of things that are necessary to affect change, they're not doing. Their hand is going to be forced over the next, let's say, decade to either put up or shut up. And the reason is because the consumer is getting wiser, and the consumer does no longer want to be complicit in a lot of the practices that big corporations who are beholden to shareholders are having to participate. People are being more conscious consumers. And we are starting to see that the consequence of Starbucks and all these kinds of things in relation to them not taking a position that's favorable with their audience, with their customers, they are seeing the ramifications of that. And people are realizing that not only is the consumer somebody who has power, but now the workforce has power. We see that today. Today, the strike started on the eastern seaboard of the United States, where all the dock workers are on strike. It's going to cost $5 billion a day, and it's going to delay delivery 5 to 7 days every single day that the strike goes on. This is going to have massive impacts for coffee. And so I go back to, I don't think that big is bad. Big is disappointing at the moment. And I hope that through these conversations that the ICO is having with big business, I hope that between that and the things that are happening out in the market, that we do start to see more conscious decisions being made, that where corporations aren't just beholden to their shareholders, they are beholden to the longevity of their business and the interests of building. They'll never build values-based businesses that are legitimately values-based businesses, but they're going to have to build businesses where they can guarantee the longevity of their supply. And when podcasts like this exist that tell coffee producers, don't sell your coffee to people who are not going to pay what you need them to pay. There are plenty of roasters out there you can sell your coffee to that are going to have a conversation with you about what's necessary. That's going to take some time to permeate, but it will permeate because the yield of coffee is going down globally year on year. We are going to hit a tipping point where the intersection between people needing to sell coffee to whoever will buy it and the availability of that coffee, it is going to meet an intersection. We just have to wait to get there.
If I may add, just
Please.
a couple of there. I think that, we, again, ICO, intergovernmental, when I represent the government, and we work with companies, but I don't represent those companies. Yep. And I think that, to the points that you mentioned, the consumer is getting smarter. The consumer, yes, I do believe that happens. And when we work in fair trade, a lot of that was about convincing the consumer to a better decision. But the biggest opportunity, and we have seen this in coffee too, with a lot of ramifications, but if we think about opportunity around sustainability in coffee, has come from arguably regulations that government have passed to make sure that deforestation is something in the past. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are a lot of problems when any regulation gets implemented, there are a lot of nuances and a lot of issues that can be very painful. But that power of the government, in this case, of making a significant impact on a sustainability topic, and then it comes after that the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, that includes living income, right, as part of what it could be. There is a tremendous potential for change that could come from that too. Now, that wasn't a decision of the governments just because they wanted to do that. It's the people who voted for them, educated consumers in many cases, have that voice too to be able to make those changes. So for me, it goes back to the point, there is a potential and a power that, well managed, can have significant impact, in this case at the consumer level, having impact in production, but also when we work together with companies and governments and producing countries to try to, an issue such as living income, make sure that there is a clear path for farmers' prosperity. So I think that is also something to realize. There is moments in which that power can be used for good.
Well, and that power can also be used to do something that has happened very peculiarly this year, which is that governments around the world in coffee-producing countries have sent their representatives, in inverted commas, to Dubai to try and convince me to stop this podcast. They have done a number of things to try and stop the dissemination of the information and the discussions that we've been having. So, it's I mean, why has always boggled me every time those conversations, start off as, hey, we'd like to see if we could have a conversation about your consulting services. And then it gets revealed that person is being sent here either by, I'm not going to name the governments from around the world that send their representatives to try and shut this podcast down, but it's real, and it's not just governments, it's big corporations as well. So I am constantly looking for hope as to how we can come together to fix this, because we are in a crisis. And a big part of that crisis is the coffee producers are not making a living income. Another part of that crisis is neither are baristas, except in countries like Australia. But baristas are not making a living income, a living wage. Also, the business model is broken. And so most people who own cafes are barely surviving. The barrier to entry is so low for this industry for people to open businesses that most of them open these businesses not recognizing that they're going to be living below a minimum wage for a very long time, perhaps for the whole time that they've got this business. This is why I keep talking about this coffee crisis. So it's complex and it's complicated, and none of it is going to be easy to solve. And this is why I go back to big corporations are not bad. They're just disappointing at this moment in time.
Yes. And I would love, you mentioned that baristas in Australia, if I understood you correctly, are making close to living income or that in much better situation.
Above it, about $30 an hour.
And why is that?
So I was a barista in Australia for about 15 years. That's my original country that I was born in. And that's because the government we have a very high, so yes, the government, but for those who aren't watching, right, he put up his finger and he's like, see, it's the government. Yes, it's the government. However, the problem is that for small business owners, it is now 50% of their revenue to run a business, which is 50% of their revenue goes to wages. So, which then leads them to have to pay less for coffee. It leads them to have to pay less for other things. They can't survive. You've got to take from somewhere to pay something else. So the business model is built from government to suit corporations. The corporations can afford to pay those prices for wages. Small business can't. And this is where we've got a problem. So governments are getting involved in helping the corporations and holding the corporations accountable. But that same accountability is being applied to small business and it's breaking them. And now we have a problem. Because most cafes can't live on having to pay their baristas $30 an hour. It's just prohibitive. So in America, they have different systems, which means that baristas are oppressed. When I was living and working in America as a consultant in coffee and a small business owner, baristas were telling me that the only time they could afford to eat was when they were on shift. We've got a broken model. So this is why, again, it's complicated and it's complex.
Yeah. And again, my point is, yes, the model doesn't work for everybody. It works much better for some than others. Mm-hmm. So to change that, I think that we can learn from the lessons.
Yes.
When it works, right? There might be things from the Australian example that work well and other things that didn't. Can we take the good one? And, you said beyond. Going back to the Brazil example that I used earlier around bringing profitability to farmers and all of the investments that went over decades. There are good things that could be built from that in other countries that could help that too, right? So in that sense, maybe there will have to be adapted or change that. But there are, we can build from the good examples that exist. There are a few, right? And try to replicate those with the local stakeholders, with the local farmers, the local governments, really driving that and not being, top-down approach from anywhere else. I think that for me, my point. I I only became an international civil servant a year ago. Before that, I've been criticizing governments a lot. I also see that as a citizen, as a, working with, private sector and all of that, of course. But I see that for this specific example, for coffee, for living income, thinking about a sustainability, climate crisis, I think that there is a key role that government can play, that government with companies can play, that they can help to create the right environment for farmers to thrive, for the environment to start being restored. I think that we can play that role. It might not work, but I think that there is an opportunity there, and that's what I want to help anybody who wants to join size that and try to do the best with that.
Okay, I love it. We've got one episode to go, and we're going to be talking about the path forward in achieving a living income. So join us for the final episode of this fantastic series with Miguel. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.